Hello, this is Michael again. So I want to talk about 10 myths about eating disorders and the people who have them. The reason that I want to talk about this specifically is because I'm in recovery from an eating disorder, and I've definitely experienced a lot of people believing these myths, and it's not good. It's not good for people who have eating disorders, it's not good for people who don't, it's not good for the loved ones of people who have eating disorders. So let's get to the debunking, and hopefully we will learn some awesome, helpful things. Myth number 1. Only young, white, privileged, wealthy, suburban, pretty girls get eating disorders. Mental illnesses do not have social boundaries. I feel like this myth implies that eating disorders are born out of boredom, out of vanity, out of just having too much crap, and that's just not the case. There are a lot of factors that contribute to having an eating disorder, but having a lot of money or being privileged is not one of them. Myth number 2, everybody with an eating disorder is skinny. I'm illustrating this one for you right now. Obviously, that's not true. This myth is such a big part of the way that we see eating disorders that a lot of people who have eating disorders who are not skinny either refuse to get help because they're embarrassed or don't think they're sick enough to get help. Everybody with an eating disorder should have the opportunity to start recovering. You not being thin enough to start to recover is a really weird thing. Myth number 3, eating disorders are caused by something like media, something like television, something like the culture that we live in, something like your family. Eating disorders are definitely part nurture. The best way that I've ever heard this described is to say that nature loads the gun and nurture pulls the trigger. So not everybody with a genetic predisposition to eating disorders is going to get them. Myth number 4, every fat person or big person or chubby person with an eating disorder has binge eating disorder. I experienced this. When I was pregnant, I told one of my doctors that I had an eating disorder, and she looked at me and said, "Oh, I guess that was a binge eating disorder then?" It's like the worst thing to say to somebody with an eating disorder. Don't guess things, just ask. What kind of eating disorder is that? What kind of behaviors do you have? Myth number 5, eating disorders are new. Like I said before, eating disorders are largely controlled by genetics, and in the past we may not have said that person wants to be skinny like a model. We may have said that person is very holy and wants to be skinny as a form of flagellation to experience the agony of some god or divine figure. And we've called it an eating disorder only in the fairly recent past, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't there. It was just, they didn't have a name for it. They didn't understand that it was a mental illness. Myth number 6, eating disorders are about choice or vanity. That's not true. I think one way that you can see that fairly clearly is that a lot of people who have an eating disorder and are very, very skinny still hate the way their body looks. And oftentimes having an eating disorder is more about trying to shrink away, trying not to take up any space, trying not to be noticed, trying not to get in the way. Those things, I think, tend to be the logic behind eating disorders for a lot of people, more than wanting to look a certain way. Myth number 7, eating disorders are a phase, especially in teenagers, and they'll just get over it. Diets are maybe a phase, like excessive dieting or yo-yo dieting can just end when that person reaches maturity. Even consistent dieting or yo-yo dieting is not the same as disordered eating. Disordered eating does not just disappear. It's very dangerous to just let it be. Number 8, eating solves eating disorders. Eating is a very, very scary thing for people who have eating disorders, and giving them cookies or giving them spaghetti or giving them whatever is their favorite food or what you think is their favorite food does not solve that problem. They don't need a hamburger. They need help and support and the ability to start to recover. Myth number 4, ETNOS is not a thing. If you don't know what ETNOS is, there are multiple kinds of eating disorders. There is anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, and ETNOS. So the first three are ones that are fairly well known. They have relatively strict criteria for diagnosis. You have to be engaging in certain behaviors in a certain pattern for a certain amount of time. ETNOS is when you have an eating disorder that doesn't neatly fall into any of those categories. So for example, if you restrict heavily but you're not quite anorexic, you purge but maybe not through vomiting, and you binge but maybe not consistently and maybe in concert with heavy restriction. Somebody who has those things has ETNOS. Of the 4 types of eating disorders, ETNOS has the highest mortality rate because it's harder for people with ETNOS to get treatment and to start working on recovery because a lot of people don't think it's real. Myth number 10, it's not that big of a deal to have an eating disorder. It's a very, very, very big deal to have an eating disorder. Eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness ever. It's not taken seriously, and it needs to be. We can't lose people to something that can be treated and can be taken care of because there's weird societal ideas about it.